Welcome to the Behold podcast, a project of Arcade Church. My name is Beth Whitney, and I'm here with my co-host, Craig Hardinger, today, and we also have a special guest. Our friend Jim Culp is here from Iglesias del Oeste. We spent some time talking with him about what he is doing with his ministry down in Ensenada, Mexico, and in 10 other countries around the world. It's super exciting to hear how the Spirit is empowering him and his leaders to help create healthy leaders and empower the Latin American church. So take a listen, like, comment, and subscribe. Share this podcast with a friend. Let's get started. Hi, Craig.
How you doing, Beth?
Great. And hi, Jim.
Hi. It's so good to be here with you guys.
Really good to have you here.
Yeah.
So this is Jim Culp. He is our friend and brother. You're our first repeat guest, so to speak.
Yeah. How's that make you feel?
Very privileged.
It should make you feel highly valued.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the word.
Because you are.
Valued.
Yeah.
Blessed and highly favored.
Ooh.
I think.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Way to go. Way to go.
Whoa.
Behold on us.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
So Jim is, you're one of our missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
You work mostly out of Ensenada, Mexico,
Yes.
but you run Iglesias del Oeste and Seminario del
Okay.
Oeste.
Slow it down.
Okay.
Please be kind. Rewind. Say it again slower. Because I've been working on this. And so you got to say it slower.
I'm going to let Jim say it so you'll learn it correctly.
Well, no, because he'll say it with an accent. Can you say it? Say it the way you usually say it, Jim.
Iglesias del Oeste.
Yeah, see?
Now you say it, Craig.
No. No.
Say Seminario.
I blew Feliz Navidad last Christmas. And so
That's
I'm
right.
not gonna
Did
do
you
it
say
again.
it Felix Navidad?
No. And the problem is it went viral as far as our program, and I just completely blew Feliz Navidad on microphone. So say it again though.
Okay. Jim leads Iglesias del Oeste, which basically means Churches of the West.
That's correct.
And Seminario del Oeste, Seminary of the West. So you are partnering with Latin American churches and organizations to help develop healthy leaders and all of that awesome stuff.
Yeah. So we've been down there 7 years, and we do both networks of churches and then training and equipping of pastors and leaders in the Spanish-speaking world. We currently have students in 9 different countries, and so our goal is to see healthy leaders mobilize the church in their country, and now we're even seeing Latinos go to the nations. So yeah,
That's
So
very
awesome.
cool. Before we get to that, because I want to talk more about that,
Yeah.
but I'd like to talk something more serious,
okay.
and that is Mexican food.
Oh yeah,
Because
That I can talk about.
First of all, I'm getting ahead of myself. Is your wife Annie is in the room,
yes she is.
and she's not on camera, but if you can shout out Annie, hello.
Hi, everybody.
There you go.
That was
There you
good.
go. There you go. And it's really great to have you both with us. You are so Arcadian through and through. We love you guys. We don't see you nearly enough. But tell it, because in our email correspondence, Jim was telling us that he is a Mexican food snob.
Yes, through and through.
Kind of arrogant. Not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
I'm not gonna lie. I've
But
got
you
a
can
lot more
you can back
experience
it
than
up.
you do.
You can back it up though.
Yes.
All right. So tell us, because when Beth and Debbie and I went down there several years ago, you introduced us to street tacos, and we still talk about them.
Yeah, changed your life.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
Baja fish tacos, I
Right.
seriously tried for a year.
Yeah.
Because my husband and I like authentic Mexican. We'll go to the little taqueria or whatever, not Taco Bell. There's nothing wrong with Taco Bell. But I tried for a year.
There is something wrong with Taco Bell.
I tried for a year to find a good Baja fish taco in Sacramento. And I got a lot of stomach aches, but I never found.
Yeah.
So tell us.
Yeah,
tell us
really,
about.
we don't do fish tacos outside of Ensenada.
Okay.
Because we know even
Oh,
in
I can
Mexico,
see why.
even in Mexico, they're just not going to do it right. So,
Right.
let's not waste our time there.
Okay.
And so, I would like to break it down for you in 3 different geographical regions of food.
Keep in mind, this is just a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is
We
all
need a
we're
map.
going to get through, though.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I know you
All
had
right.
some other questions, but this may be it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
But at least it's the important thing.
Yeah. Yes.
So first, the best Mexican food, authentic, diverse Mexican food, is found in the state of Oaxaca. And that's where your things like moles come from.
Yes.
And, these sauces that have like 100 ingredients and they're cooked for days. And it is just like the cradle of that kind of Mexican food. And so you go there and you just eat. And they have 7 different types of moles. And you're like, yes, please, all 7.
Just keep them coming.
And then late at night, the taco carts come out. Late at night. And they have the best tacos al pastor, just shaving the little pork off, putting the pineapple on top,
Okay.
a salsa. We're shouting out to my wife. My wife can put down some tacos al pastor. And that is her thing. That is
All
her
right,
favorite
Annie.
taco.
My respect
She-
for Annie just
Yeah.
up a notch.
Shout out to Tacos Primo in the
You
city
are just
of
talking about a
Oaxaca.
Mexican gut bomb
And
here.
so you can go, you order plates of 5. They come in orders of 5. But they're just little and you eat them and you're like,
5 more, please.
5 more, please. I'm okay if I'm sick after 5 more. They're so good. So Oaxaca, fantastic
Okay.
food region.
which is an inland state, right?
And way south,
Okay.
south.
Right. Okay.
And say the name of it again.
Oaxaca.
But that's spelled like O-A.
Oaxaca.
Well, I think we have a restaurant here in Sacramento that
probably.
specializes
In
in
Oaxacan food,
and that's
for
Zocalo's,
sure. Yeah.
which is one of our favorite places.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for sure, and you can get good tacos right next to the Zocalo there in downtown Oaxaca. So good. So
Okay. All right.
Maybe you're just like,
That's category number 1. or-
yeah, it is probably number 1 on like authentic, top-notch Mexican food.
Okay.
Mexicans
All right.
who want kind of cradle of Mexican food go to Oaxaca.
Okay. All right.
Now, where we live, Ensenada, is kind of the new up-and-coming food region.
Oh, okay.
Because we're next to the Wine Valley, which attracts restaurants and foodies from all over, come from both the States, but also from all over Mexico. And they're creating this food that's called Baja Med.
Oh.
So it's kind of this med-influenced, heavy seafood, farm to table, super creative, but like with Mexican type flavors to it. And
Okay,
so
all right, I'm there.
super great. So we had, for our anniversary, we go out to these fun places and like we had tacos, but out of slow roasted beef cheek. And so it's like this hipster fancy, but then
I was
amazing.
just hankering for some beef cheek.
Right?
Just the other day.
The other day, you're like, man, if I could just
I
get
have
a
never
little
heard of
beef
that
cheek.
cut before.
It's delicious. Slow roasted. It's
Can
like
I
a
just
rose.
ask
It's
where the
kinda-
beef cheek comes from?
It's from the top cheek, not the bottom cheek.
Okay.
But
Well, that would be rump
called
roast.
The rump roast, correct. That is a very shared mind right there, man. That is very shared mind. Sorry, you were behind on that one.
Yeah. You didn't know you were hanging out with some
I
middle
was
schoolers, did you?
behind on that one. Thanks.
Oh,
Nice.
oh, good one.
Thanks.
So totally different, new kind of inventive, creative. The other's really traditional. Ensenadas, just trying new things.
Yeah,
And people
yeah.
are coming from the mainland interior and saying like, I want to try grandma's recipe, but like
With a twist
With a
or-
twist,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it's really this farm to table type of culture, and so that's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm anxious to try that.
Yeah.
If we ever get
And-
invited down.
well,
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
so the newest taco in Sacramento is the queso birria taco.
Oh, yeah.
Which it's like two
Where's that at?
like any little hole in the
Any
wall
taqueria
Mexican.
kind?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's 2 corn tortillas, but they melt cheese between them,
Right.
and then you get the shredded beef
Yeah.
that's probably been
Yeah.
boiling or roasting all day.
Is it beef cheek?
Could be.
I don't know if it's beef cheek or not. And then
Could
they give you consomme, so like an au jus, and then you take this greasy, delicious taco
Go
and
on.
you dip it in the consomme,
Oh,
and then
That sounds
it's
good.
amazing.
Yeah, we call that Thursday. And it is wonderful.
Yeah.
And like we had heard of birria before, but like it is so good. And it's a breakfast food in Mexico.
Oh, well, you wouldn't be
Like,
hungry till lunch.
You run out of hot, steaming, boiled meat by like 1 p.m.
Wow.
People get it and they're like walking with cupo meat as their
Cupo meat.
Yeah. And I'm just like, finally, a culture that gets me.
Yes.
Why
Yes.
do you want to force eggs on me in the morning? Give me a cup of meat.
That's right.
And so it's how I keep my girlish figure.
Alrighty.
Good.
Well, enough of that silliness.
All right.
So tell us about how you and Annie started in Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, you were church planners in Chico, and then you just moved to Mexico.
Just like that.
What the heck?
Yeah.
How did all that start?
Yeah. We blame God.
Okay.
And so, and really it was just fun to watch God kind of work on our heart over a series of years with us not seeing it, you know.
Yeah.
And so we were happy in our church plant, living up in Chico, believed we would be buried there. You know, we were all in and committed there. And working on training leaders here in Northern California and loving that. That just really fed my soul to be able to work with leaders. And so we were really content. But one year we had come home and from a mission trip / vacation to Central Europe. And we were absolutely exhausted. And I said to Annie as we're flying home on this international flight, like, so next year, something a little more chill? And she was like, yes, next year, I just want to lay on a beach for a week.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, we could work on that. So really, we say it all started with vacation. Because as I started to look for where we could afford a beach vacation, it just kept getting further south and crossing the border. And so we were in this small place in close to Ensenada, and so we rented this place early in the year. We've got 4 or 5 months to look out towards it, and then the next thing you know, it's mid-February, and our son comes home, Ben, and he says, "Hey, why do my Mexican friends today at school have ashes on their forehead?" And we had just never talked to them about Lent and Ash Wednesday and all of that, and so we explain it there, and you know, our son says, "So why don't we do that this year, Lent?" Well, okay, let's do it. So I just pull off this book that I knew was like a 40-day devotional, totally not thinking, but God just putting things in place for this conversation that He's growing us towards. And it's called A Place in the Table by Chris Say, who is church planner in Texas, and it's talking about what the global church looks like and identifying with the needs of the church around the world. And so each day you did a devotional that talked about the gospel and its realities in different places. In the back of the book, it says, maybe you're doing this for 40 days with your family. Here are some challenges. And so challenge number 1 was pick a country and pray for it for the next 40 days. Well, we said, well, let's pray for Mexico. And we're going to go there this summer. Let's just pray for Mexico. Great. And then the next one, and Culp family loves a challenge, right? So we're like all in. So the next one was eat on and live on a diet and budget from your country for 40 days. So at the time, the average Mexican family ate on $9 a day.
Wow.
And we were like, Culps are all in. We love a challenge, so we're going to do it. And we were like, and we're going to go all the way. So like, if Jim goes to Starbucks and spends $4.50 on a foofy latte, there goes half of the food budget, because that's the reality.
Yeah.
$9 a day is $9 a day.
Yeah.
And so it was just really fun for us to say, like, what does that mean? And what does that look like in a Mexican household? And so we ate tons of rice and beans with a little bit of jalapenos. And we use meat as like seasoning. You know, you just sprinkle a little bit on top. You'd have meat of the week. And we did that, and we prayed, and we saved all this money from not spending more than $9 a day. So we said, well, when we get to Mexico on vacation, we'll go find some places to donate this. So finally we get on vacation. It's early June, and the beach is wonderful. but like our heart is pulled into the town to meet these ministries where we want to donate money. And so we go and visit, and we just, like, it is unlike anything we've ever done and experienced together. And so we end the week, and we're heading home, and I say to Annie, I said, like, I can't imagine not coming back here next year. And that isn't like us. We're explorers, but I'm like, we're coming back. And I said, I want to bring other people back here. And so we planned that, and we came back the next year, and that year we visited a couple other churches. And one of the things that God just really opened our eyes to is there were these overburdened pastors and tons of young believers. And there was this gap and disconnect in between this overburdened pastor and this great potential. And it was there that I just knew God was calling us into that. And so we had a group of teenagers with us, and I was driving a boys' van, and Annie was driving a girls' van, and we had not talked together yet. And I was thinking, how in the world am I going to open this conversation with my wife that's just stirring in my heart, and I'm ignoring these knucklehead teenage boys in my van, and Annie's having a full-on conversation about what she's seen God do in my heart with our youth pastor. And they're talking back and forth and having these full conversations, and so we get home, and it's 2 or 3 weeks, and we don't talk at all about it. And then one day, I just say, so what would you think about? And she's like, I knew it. I knew that's what. And so about a month later, we prayed for a month for our family, what that would look like. And then we took time to talk with our kids about it. We didn't want to pull them kicking and screaming, and we didn't want to disobey God. So we wanted God to align our whole family with this call. And it was just fun to watch God do that.
Well, it's interesting because this last summer we did a sermon series on the Apostles' Creed. And our missions and outreach pastor, Tom Norris, preached on the Holy Spirit portion of the Creed and being led by the Spirit. And so much of what you just got through talking about, this pilgrimage from being content and challenged in Chico at Orchard Church to the point now where you are in Ensenada, is just this faithful, gradual, probably conspicuous at times, leading, and probably inconspicuous at times of the Holy Spirit to the point where you are now. When you first got to Ensenada, you're there. You guys did the language school. You learned the Spanish language in a year, something like that, or at least to the point where you could function. What did you go in there expecting to do, and is it different than what you're doing now?
So first we learned, we worked on Spanish, and we started our first group.
You did that as a family, right?
As a family, and Annie and I did 15 weeks, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and
that's brutal.
The only time that divorce and murder at the same time were brought out. We learned so differently, and so she'd be like, "Oh, this is easy," and I'd be like, "I don't even like you anymore." And then the next day it'd be the opposite, and then the next day we would reunify as one flesh in our hatred towards the teacher, right? And so those were the saving moments for us, so just. But so great, and we were committed. We didn't want translators ever. We wanted to be able to connect with people, and we wanted to teach academically. And so we were like, we want really formal, so push us in that. And that was such a great experience for us. And so really it was 6 months later that we started teaching. And what I learned in that first group is I brought North American context to Latin America. And so good things that I would say, like, this is essential in talking through, just having hard discussions with leaders in a California context.
Did they welcome you?
Oh, totally welcome.
Even
and it had
as an
invited.
American?
Yes, and it had invited us, and we went specifically and started with them because we knew it was a safe place to kind of wrestle and learn.
Right.
That first group was really just a learning place for us. And we had been down for 2 years before on those it's the first church we met when we went down to deposit money that we had saved.
Wow.
And so to have that invitation from them was just a neat thing. But one of the things, that I learned quickly is, for instance, when I was teaching leadership here, I wanted to make sure we spent a lot of time looking at what servant leadership and what the humble leader looked like. And we empower others out of a place of humility, that we need each other, that we are better together. When I got there and started to teach that, humility wasn't the issue. It was belief that they could be empowered.
Oh, wow.
And so
okay.
it was this conceptual change that I had to take, that really you're teaching similar type of scriptural stuff, but how the application of that's going to be. Here, I want to talk spirit-led humility, that we're engaging. I'm not trying to carry everything. I'm engaging others. There it was out of a place of insecurity. I don't know if I'm empowered, so how do I empower others?
Right.
And so it is, we just do a lot of work and busyness, but there's never really this advancement of vision because there aren't these empowered leaders that walk together. And so we really had to take the program and say, from that mentality, how do we kind of rewrite and retrain that? How do we make that a practical step? And so really now we write it around how helping the leader understand calling, and they are empowered by the Spirit, and then they are called to disciple and empower others to multiply. And so, I think that's been the big thing.
I want to go back. You said a few minutes ago, you named an overburdened pastor. Tell us what an overburdened pastor in the Global South looks like.
Yeah, I think that's important because it looks different. The Global South, speaking of Latin America, Africa, and South Asia, you see the church really growing, but realities of the church look a lot different than they do in our Western church, northern church context. And so the majority of pastors are going to be bivocational. And the majority of them are going to respond to a call to ministry without having the opportunity to be trained. Right. And so
maybe they're working as an electrician.
Right. So they're working, let's say, 40 some hours a week. And especially when we talk about Mexico, it is the highest work week in the world. So the average work week is 5 tens and a half Saturday.
Wow.
And so a pastor that's working a traditional job is working 55 hours a week, and then doing probably 2 meetings a week at night, and preparing for Sunday, and then responding to every emergency call.
Right.
And because they don't know how to empower anybody else.
Right.
And so they're responding to everything. And so you had this man in particular, I knew he was working construction, doing carpentry work, and had a high needs child in the home, and a teenager, and had a church of probably 80 to 90 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And sweeping the floor and unlocking the building, and had no access to training to even know that there was a different way.
Yeah.
And you'd have conversations about, like, where do you see the church? Where would you like to take it? And he would ask me, where do you see my church? Oh. Because they've never understood that God has called them and empowered them in a God-given calling and vision to advance. And so they've waited on missionaries to say, here's what I think you could do. In which, most likely, even if I said that, he would say, and how would I do that? Who do I, like, right. I'm already oversaturated.
Yeah, right.
And so this is what we do. And so, so I would see him, but I would look at his worship team, and it was like 4 or 5 20-year-old boys. And I was like, That's the answer, and that's how this church advances and multiplies, and new churches spin off, and so that's what it looks like.
Did you go down with that intent, or was it to? Because I really don't remember. I remember walking with you through when you and Annie were thinking about going down there and things, but I couldn't remember. Was it basically? I don't mean this in a minimal way, but to plant churches.
No.
But you saw the problem as you talked to pastors.
Yeah. No, from the start, our goal originally, and this partly was from not being able to see the bigger picture, was to raise second-level leaders.
Okay.
I wanted to see elders and deacons and teachers and future pastors that came alongside a solo pastor. Mm-hmm. And so really that's what we felt like our call was. A lot like we talked about, we did the ministry leadership certificate here, and it still goes on in Northern California. It was a lot of that. If a pastor doesn't have anything, well, this would be good. But really, if a pastor doesn't have a second level of leaders that are trained and equipped, then that's really what our target audience was originally. Now, as it's grown, we've seen there's a need more for pastoral development and church planter development, which we've grown into, as well as continuing this second level leader. And so we do different levels of programs.
Now, when you talk about kind of going back to your question, B, as far as empowering leaders and things, what, from a practical standpoint, Jim, what are some of the things that you implemented? What are some of the things that you saw bore fruit from that? Because I don't recall you going down to be this global missionary, and yet that's exactly what God has made of you and Annie, in the sense of, you mentioned 9 different countries. We'll probably get to that in a moment. But from a practical standpoint, what were some of the things that you used to empower these leaders?
Yeah. So everything we do, Latin America wants microwave reproduction of leaders, and we tell them we're crockpots.
Yeah.
And so if you don't want that, then we're not for you. We're going to crockpot some leaders together. And so the shortest program we do is 2 years. And so we do a 2 and a 3 year more in-depth program.
Certificate type programs?
So the first one we've written, the lowest one, we've written at about an associate's level.
Okay.
In Mexico, there's a degree called Técnico Superior. It's one area of study focused at about 60 credit hours.
Okay.
And then the next one we do at a master's level, and it was really cool. Got to work with Bert on how to develop it. And I said, he said, here's what good standards would be. And I said, what are minimum standards? Like, I want to meet the standards, but what are the minimum? And we get there. So,
and when you say Bert, you mean
Bert Downs,
Downs
former president of Western Seminary.
Great guy.
We got to see him a couple months ago. It's just
so
encouraging. And one of the things, and we went with classics. We read Tozer and just eat it up. And the good stuff. It is good. And we don't talk strategy. Strategy people will find, and there's great stuff that you can read out. But strategy is so specific to a specific ministry. And so what we do is we want good, solid, foundational theological basics. So the first year is always that. And so we do a year of that. And we want to speak the same language on what that is, because that's going to help us as we continue to walk forward. And then the second year, no matter what program you're in, that's where we talk about discipleship, multiplying of leaders, and ministry development plans. And so every person at the end of their second year of training has a ministry plan for their next 3 or 4 years. And they respond to, what is my calling? What's my story? Like, Jim's got that crazy story about how he ended up here. What's my crazy story? How did I get here? And we want people to feel like, I'm supposed to be doing this. This is hard, but this is where I'm supposed to be.
Everybody who follows the Spirit has a crazy story.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I want them to know it and say, like, we identify in that, right?
Yeah.
And then we want to say, like, what's your vision and values as a leader, as a ministry? And let's figure out, how do we form that? And not what someone else has said for you, what do you feel like God's calling you to do?
It's got to be life-giving to
It
them.
is. It is unbelievable
Yeah.
to watch those light bulbs turn on, right? And so then as we walk through that second year, and then as it goes on, we talk about how discipleship is the number one way to multiply leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's be intentional about discipling the next generation of leaders. And so at the end of that, they have a whole plan on what my vision, values, what strategies I want to learn to advance this vision. How am I going to disciple people in this vision now? And how are we going to replicate that systematically? And then they're ready to launch.
Yeah.
And what we started to find is people were like, well, let's launch. And that's how we honestly have gone global, is people just said, well, Jim, you made us write all this out. Let's do it. How are you going to help us do it? And so one of the things that we did, we originally went down with this heart to train and equip, but really quickly saw that our ministry needed to grow into also helping mobilize. And so we train and equip these leaders now with the purpose of saying, how do we continue to walk alongside of you into this mobilization, whether that be church planting, whether it be starting a backyard Bible club in your community, or whether it be serving Arab refugees in Romania. If that's where God's calling, how do we help take that step? So we've grown our staff to think about that mobilization piece. But as we started talking about that piece, we said, we don't want to do that if we can't care for these people long term as well. And so we now say we train and equip, mobilize, and care for healthy leaders. Originally, it was just we want to train and equip them to be healthy leaders. But now we're a few generations through the training part and saying, man, there's so much more life to keep walking, and we're seeing multiplication of an expansion of the gospel.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So you mentioned 9 countries, and that sounds like that just expanded organically. I mean, we all know it's the Spirit's leading.
Exactly.
But from our perspective, that wasn't your intention when you moved down there. So what are the 9 countries?
See let's work south to north. So Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Mexico, Latinos in the United States.
Okay.
You forgot Spain.
And Spain, 10.
Oh, you're not in Africa? Wow, that's too bad.
We have missionaries in Northern Africa.
They've sent missionaries to Northern Africa.
So, and I guess technically one of them is studying. So we have a student in. And then we have missionaries that we've sent outside of Latin America in 2 North African countries, and just recently to Romania. And
well, I got to tell you, and B, you're on the board with Jim and Annie. And so, I get what you guys are doing through reports that she gives the team and things. I tell you, I've been doing this a long time. I've been a pastor for a long time. I have never seen a more fruitful ministry on the foreign field like I've seen yours. It's and I've just kind of had a front row seat. We've prayed for you, Debbie and I prayed for you guys. We love you guys. We see you probably once a year kind of thing. But what is happening, what God is doing through you, and now through other people that you may not even know, is nothing more than revivalistic. That's kind of how I would fit that in. And I don't use that word lightly. I think sometimes we do too quickly, but I see nothing but a revival in the Southern Hemisphere due in large part to what God is doing with you guys.
And I think first it's the Spirit's move.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing that we committed to early on was not waiting for America to send us more missionaries, but we raised a team of Mexicans and Cubans and have empowered and equipped and resourced and funded them to do so much more than what we ever dreamed or imagined.
Well, I would have to imagine, because, as long as I've been a pastor, there have been schools and churches that have sent young people by the thousands, tens of thousands to Mexico. I would think even from the Mexican nationalists, there is missionary fatigue from American missions. I don't mean to minimize what goes on, but I think sometimes the glut of that defangs the ministry and the gospel from going even further.
International Missions Board did a study probably about 10 years ago now and said that 70% of Mexican ministries exist to serve North Americans coming to serve there.
What's the percentage?
70. So you think of a country of 130 million people, and it's incredibly underserved when it talks about actual investment into the church. It never gets there. It's the Mexican ministry exists, the missionaries there to serve American teens that come down and build a couple houses. And what a blessing for those families that they have a house.
Sure. But it's mainly along the border.
But it's mainly the first 100 miles along the border. And so in Mexico, for example, we're working in an area called the Circle of Silence. It is the least evangelized area in the Western Hemisphere. And it's about a 10 to 12 hour drive from the border. But missions never has gotten down there. And you know what? An American's not going to be the one to penetrate there.
Right.
And so we're mobilizing from the southern part of Mexico, students that we have partnered with, church that has this missional heart to send to the unreached, and we're partnering with them. And now we partner with 5 church planters and are just finishing
within
training
that circle.
Within that circle, and it is hard, man. It is hard ground, and we're in a town of 10,000 people. One of them that, in its existence, had never had a visible evangelical presence, and it's like that's just unheard of, And now Luis, he has been there 5 years as a church planter. He's 28 years old now, and has a group of 50 or so young, vibrant. It's like a giant youth group, and we're partnering with him.
And you went down there with nothing.
And he went, sent. We partnered with him, and the last year we helped them buy a piece of ground. We're hoping to build the first evangelical church in that municipality, which is like a county. And you think Mexico, Mexico's reached. And that just is a misunderstanding of what Mexico really is and how big it is.
Yeah.
We go to Ensenada and we see lots of churches. And Ensenada's been blessed by short-term missions. But also probably limited from seeing how it could expand the gospel because it didn't have its own vision for Mexico. And so we're trying to rethink how that does and empower locals, nationals, to reach their own people.
So you've brought up a few things, a pastor who's working 55 hours outside of his pastoral duties. Luis, who's 28, has been a church planter for 5 years. I know there's lots of other examples of believers who've said yes to the call, right? So thinking about those people you know of who are part of the Latin American church, what can we as American churchgoers or American church leaders or, people listening, church attenders, what can we learn from our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world?
Yeah. And I'm going to take it backwards first. One of the things that I think that we bring and help, and I just think, it's what we're good at in the church. We're really good at seeing how structure helps us get from A to Z.
Yeah.
We're very linear.
Right. And we're linear in that. And we're able to teach and pass that vision for how to go that direction. And that is not a Latino, right? That is not a Latino. And so we want to help them be able to do that within their culture. But what I have learned so much is Latinos are so obedient to saying yes to the Spirit's move in their heart and say, we'll start A today. And
worry about B tomorrow.
We don't know how we'll ever get to B, C, D. But God's called me to plant a church, and tomorrow there will be one.
Yeah.
And it might just be me, my wife, our 2 kids, but it's a church, and we'll see where it goes from there.
It's so
We're
not
all
Western,
in.
is it?
Right. It's so not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so not. And that's just so exciting. We were talking at lunch about our friend Yami in Cuba. She is a fantastic leader. Her and her elders maintain just this incredible growth in their church after their husband died of COVID.
Wow.
And we talked to her, and she said, no, I feel this is where I'm called. And the elders have said, let's keep going. We have a vision. Let's keep leading this forward. And we were there in January, and their their worship leader had just graduated from seminario with us. We graduated 28 people from their church.
Oh my goodness!
And it's a church where
in Cuba,
where it's only legal to assemble 30 people. There were 275 people in worship that day, and just so she has this dynamic young man. Crazy full of the Spirit, we'll say, but she just told him he just got married, and she said, I got to let you go. Like, I know you're called, and I now know you're trained and equipped, and so if I would keep you as our worship leader, it would be disobedient to God. And so last week they just hung a sign out on their front porch, and now they're that church, and 30 people went. And they'll start and they'll multiply and what the Cuban government doesn't understand is that they totally have created a situation of multiplication instead of addition.
Yeah.
By saying, you could be in trouble for having more than 30. So the church has said, I guess we have to raise a lot of leaders then to disciple 30 people at a time. It's unbelievable.
See, and I'm so jealous of that because I can't help but think with a North American mind is you got to have a vision.
Right, yeah.
You got to have a strategy.
You got to have your dollars lined up.
Yeah, you got to have everything lined up
Right.
because, man, you just don't know.
Right.
And the truth is that's far more biblical than how we do things.
Yeah.
Far more biblical.
Yeah.
I think of in the book of Acts when the Holy Spirit tells Philip, go talk to that Ethiopian dude over there in the chariot.
Right.
Well, what's the plan? What am I going to say? Philip just obeyed.
Yeah.
And I see that continually in the stories that I hear from even today about your experiences down there. I'm jealous for that.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah, I think so often, we get to see and experience like Paul with Lydia, and okay, well now these group of ladies are saved, so I guess there's a church here, right?
Yeah.
And we just see that so often of like she's like, I watched you walk across that street. You're now equipped. You've got a calling. Like it would be disobedient of me to keep you in this position.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a woman who's got the empowerment part.
Yeah.
And her church sees that, and they've spun off several churches in the last few years, and so just amazing what
that is so cool.
The power of God does.
That is.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Probably last season 2. Beth and I did a podcast show on the ascension gifts from Ephesians 4. And I know that you're, a big fan of that as I am. We've had a lot of conversations over that and stuff. How has that played? And just to review the listener in case you weren't part of season 2, the ascension gifts are in Ephesians 4, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers. And it's a great passage. I look at the book of Ephesians as constitutional. In the sense that Paul is writing this to the Ephesians, but he's writing that to the church at large.
Okay.
If you want to see the fullness of Christ, this is how you do it. How have you seen that play out in how you've trained some of the people down there?
Yeah, and really, just a little bit of background. I'm a huge fan because you preached it and it changed my life. And honestly, probably we're in Mexico partly because of you. So if anybody ever wants to blame that, because I came into a retreat.
Sorry, Annie.
Yeah. I showed up at a pastor's retreat and I thought, why is pastoring so hard for me?
Yeah.
Like, I just always feel like I'm working in my weak spots. And
because you're an apostle, huh?
And yeah, I am. I do
right.
have those gifts. And that weekend it just clicked, and I was like, I have better pastors in my church than I am.
Yeah.
But nobody probably drives the vision like I can, because that's what I am. And I was dragging people into vision where they should have been released to pastor. And so that really changed my life. I never developed that here in a U.S. context. But when we started to grow our team, and our team now, We have a staff of 11 couples, 4 singles, and then 4 Cuban nationals as well. So in Mexico, we're about 20, and then 4 Cuban nationals. And as I think about our team, I think about what are their gifts and how are we reaching to attain the fullness of Christ as a team? Because I've learned I'm not going to reach that. We will attain that as the church, as we serve in that. And so it's really given us a good way to start thinking about that. But our mission, our ministry is to train, equip, mobilize, and care. And so really that is a lot of teaching gifts.
Yeah.
That's a lot of apostolic gifts, and that's a lot of pastoring gifts. And so those are essential gifts because we serve a lot of evangelists who are stepping out and launching churches and starting ministries. And so we come around and help them have that support as they develop. And so we've started to begin to think that full circle. And I was just talking, we have a great thinker who on our staff, Amador, he is one of our professors, will run a school that, a pastoral training center that we're currently launching. And he said, one of the things that I like about this is it lets us look at what the giftedness is of the person that we're mobilizing and say, in those early days, how do we form kind of this hedge of fullness around them so that they walk in fullness.
And they're open to that?
As they're becoming. Yeah, we're learning about it. Yeah, we're figuring this out. But I think now that we can see, like, our team has that reflected, and so we send different pieces around someone who's mobilizing to fill those gaps while they raise people up into serving in those gaps. And we teach that this is an essential piece of what that's going to look like. And so that's how we're trying to live it out. But I love that we've identified Miriam on our team has the prophetic voice. And like, that is what she does. She sees things that live in my blind spot. And God has given her a heart to see that. And so I just try to teach her, like, be kind when you come and talk to me. And she's learning that. But we have that relationship where she knows, like, I say, like, Luis and Miriam, they're this couple. Luis is a guy that everybody just wants on his team because you're going to get the hug and you're going to feel loved and cared for and encouraged by him. He's Barnabas. Yeah. And then you have Miriam, who she's the person that every team needs if you're going to actually continue to improve and grow and see beyond what you're able to. Somebody who speaks into your blind spots. And so being able to say, like, we want those people.
And do they see themselves as those gifts?
Yes, because we took time to train that and talk that out. And it was really, it's really fun. Some people are surprised, and some people you're surprised at that and say, interesting. We maybe need to help you develop how to live that out. And then other people, you're like, well, of course, and
no surprise.
No surprise. And so it really has been fun. And so, that's been an exciting, fun thing to see. Yeah. And I really think it's just helping us. There's just real strength in diversity. Yeah. The world does not need hundreds of Jim Culps. It needs Jim to fill his role, and it needs Miriam to play hers, and Luis and Amador. And we see this equal value in that.
And that empowers people.
And it empowers people.
It's not just the guy up front.
Right.
It's the empowerment of the body of Christ. And as a result, you're in 9 different countries. Yeah. I mean, that's just amazing. 10?
Apparently 10.
10.
Oh,
we
10?
counted.
Oh, 10. Okay. 10. All right. Thank you.
I'm on the board. I got to keep things accurate,
you
right?
Gotta keep it accurate.
Come on.
That's true.
Keep it precise. That's right.
So, Jim, you started in Ensenada thinking you'd be in Ensenada. And now you're in 10 countries. What kind of growing pains have you experienced, either as a leader or personally or as a ministry?
Yeah, I think always my number one prayer request when people say, how can we pray for you? there are so many more opportunities than you can say yes to. Mm-hmm. But the Spirit has the right opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. The ones that we're supposed to say yes to. And so my number one prayer request is always discernment, how to say no to things and help people find what they need, and then be all in on the things that God's calling us to say yes to. And so I think that's our biggest challenge. And, right now we're exploring some opportunities and praying about how to do that. And we've stepped into some places where we've said, like, they asked for this, but we said yes to something that they're not prepared for. And so we need to back off and be creative about how we serve there. And it's going to go slower, and we'll see what it develops into. And maybe the worst thing is we're wrong and we taught the Bible in some place that we weren't supposed to be for a couple of years. Yeah. But that does cost saying yes somewhere else.
Right.
And so that's why that's so important. And so I think that's a big one. And we just want to mobilize our team and we want to expand our team. And so we only want to see multiplication happening out on the field, but also from within us. And so there's just constantly, we're an organization that went from Jim and Annie supported missionaries to having people that we connect with in 13 different countries and across a very diverse staff, and we have country leaders and we want to continue to see that grow. We want to continue to empower there. And so really just having the ability to equip those people well. We are, somebody told me just this last weekend, you're in the sweet spot for expansion and yet the hardest spot to expand because you can't keep up structurally with the opportunity. Yeah. And I kind of love the tension.
Well, I was just going to say that sounds like that's probably where the Spirit wants you.
Yeah, I love the tension. Yeah. I love saying, like, God, you open the door and we'll figure out how to go. Yeah. And I love saying to Beth on the board, hey, the math's not going to add up. And but if God's calling, like, I figure at some point it's going to catch up. And I love that. Naturally, I could worry about money like crazy. That would be a weakness. But God's just not giving me that opportunity. Like, I've gone from Orchard Church to this, and I kind of love. It requires complete dependence on the Spirit in that, and that's fun. It's fun to live there.
You guys went from Jim and Annie supported missionaries, under an organization, right, to you have almost your own mission organization, where you are sending missionaries, and so a huge change in 7 years.
Right. Yeah, and it's gone really quickly, and
not what you expected,
and not what we expected, and growing pains, but man, how do you say no to that, right? Yeah. Like, it's so exciting, and we love it, and I will say, when we moved to Ensenada, we moved there partly because we knew that'd be a good fit for our family to start. Right. And Annie and I were always willing to say, but if that isn't where God has us long term, like, we may start there and then learn language, learn culture, have some practice, 5-7 years, few people, whatever. And then we'll see where God sends us. Well, what we didn't know was at the same time that we were praying about going, God was working in the heart of our team now, saying, like, if only someone would come and teach me and release me. Yeah. And that's what we've got to do. The team was there. The people were ready. They just didn't know it yet. And but just so natural how God just started bringing people into our lives. We taught an Alpha group. Are you familiar with Alpha, sure. Right? Yeah. So we taught an Alpha group. This church wanted to try it as a strategy, and I said, hey, we'll do it, and we'll use it as leader training, and then also have those leaders invite the non-believers to come be part, and we look now at, like, mostly we did it because we were like, we need people to practice Spanish on. That was our main thing. It was our first Bible study. Yeah. And I'm like, it's mostly video driven, and then it's just conversation for us. But we have staff members that were out of that initial group. We have
That's so cool.
lifelong people who studied with us and have continued to walk in ministry with us. We've helped them plant churches. And God just had everything ready for us to show up and just respond to his move. And we're just trying to keep up.
Yeah. I as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, here God was, with Jim and Annie Culp and Chico at Orchard Church, and he's working in your heart, leaning your affections towards Mexico.
Yeah.
And all the while that the Spirit is doing that, the Spirit is also working in the affections of people in Mexico that you probably haven't met yet.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think of like in Acts 13, when Paul goes to Corinth, gets beat up, kicked out of the town. The Holy Spirit says, I want you to go back. I want you to go back in there because I have some people there. And that sounds like what God has done for you in Mexico. I want you to go there. You don't know what's there. I do. I've got people there.
Right.
And they didn't even probably know at the time that they were people.
Yeah.
That his people.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of ministry, and it sounds like it's happened in Peru, it's happened in Argentina, Ecuador, Spain, Cuba, and it's just amazing to see that, to witness that, and to hear the stories of what God's doing down there.
Yeah.
I long for that up here. I really do. I'm jealous of that.
We do too.
I want God to move that way up here.
Yeah.
In beautiful downtown Northern California.
Yeah. Yeah, we do too.
Yeah. Can you imagine if people who feel the call of the Spirit just say yes and chase that down and God wants me to plant a church, I'm going to plant a church.
Yeah.
I don't know what step B is, but I'm going to start with A, or a backyard club, or I'm a high schooler and I'm going to ask a couple friends to do a Bible study after school, or whatever that looks like. If they just said yes.
And the obstacle to that is, but we have to have all of our ducks in a row before we can do that.
Right.
Yeah. And
when really that can be a strength.
Sure.
The structure is such a strength. We have to learn how do we who have the structure are as obedient as the people who are responding to the call.
Yeah.
And that's what I think
got to put
is
them
the
in the same
essential
room
thing.
somehow.
Yep. And say, we see your passion, we see your call. Start with 5 people.
Yeah.
And now let's start walking that out together and seeing how God develops it. The worst thing that can happen is that 5 people get discipled. Right? And that's what I think we're
that's
afraid
a bad
of.
thing, right?
Right. We extrapolate out worst thing could happen in these little contexts. And that was one of the things somebody told me is, so we sent them out. What's the worst thing that could happen? They come back?
Yeah.
We get our worship leader back in 6 months because it didn't work as a church planter? All right. But what if it does?
Yeah.
And that's what I love. What if it does? And
That's
what
good.
if it does?
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of hate to close this conversation off, but we probably need to.
Probably.
I heard someplace, even today, that there are over 2 million podcasts in the world. 2 million podcasts. And here we have Behold Podcast at Arcade Church in Sacramento. And it caused me to think, what's so special about ours? Why don't we just tell people, hey, listen to that podcast or listen to that podcast? And I think the thing that we want in this podcast is because of the name, Behold. We want people to behold Christ.
Right.
And that sounds like what's being experienced in the Southern Hemisphere is this beholding that is happening, this beauty of Christ that's happening. And what a coinkydink, God is honoring that with his presence. And as you've been talking, we want to end each podcast with Behold that. I hope that's what makes us different from the other 2 million. Now we're 2 million in one podcast. This Behold aspect. We want to behold Christ. And as you're talking, I couldn't help but think of Revelation 21, verse 5, when Jesus is saying, behold, I am making all things new. And Jim and Annie, that's what you're doing. Yeah. You are part of that call of Jesus. We tend to think that that's just going to happen when Jesus returns.
Right.
But the truth is, because of the Great Commission, that's happening now. It's happening now. Is that Jesus Christ is in the process through you and through so many other people. He is making all things new. And that's why he says, behold.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to see that.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to see that I am making all things new through what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Lord willing, he's doing that for us up here, through us, that we want to see a new Sacramento.
For sure. Yeah.
We want to see a new California, just as you want to see a new Mexico, Peru, Ecuador. Right. We want to see this new world. And Jesus has this plan of moving people, of making all things new.
Right.
And he's is using us to do that.
Yeah.
And how exciting that is.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can get so in the weeds that we're thinking, when is it going to get new?
Yeah.
And the truth is, he's doing it. He's doing that work. And we see that with what you were doing. Say the ministry again.
Iglesias del Oeste and Seminario del Oeste.
Okay.
And Jim's probably cringing.
She's
over there.
great.
Yeah,
Like
you've had
She's got
Spanish,
it.
though.
I'm trying.
Yeah, but Jim and Annie, we love you guys. We love what God's doing.
We love Arcade.
It
We
is
love you guys.
amazing what's happening down there.
Thanks.
And so we just want to hold you guys up in prayer. It's so great to have you
Yeah.
face to face.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
in
great.
person.
Way better.
Yeah.
Way
Yeah.
better. Thanks so much.
You have anything you want to sign off with?
Well, I mean, Jim and Annie are dear friends, and I am privileged to be on their board. I would just encourage people listening to pray.
Yeah.
If you're part of Arcade Church, we have a missions page where you can see who our missionaries are. They have clickable links, all of that fun stuff. Pray for our brothers and sisters who have said yes to this crazy call of the Spirit to up and leave their home country, or a good paying job, or all of these other things our missionary brothers and sisters do that we maybe don't.
Yeah.
But also, if you are listening, please share this with a friend.
Yeah.
Like our podcast, subscribe, do all the things that help us not just be the 2 million and 1th podcast that people can listen to.
Well pronounced.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Iglesias del Oeste. You were better at that one.
On that note,
Yeah.
we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.